And now a continuation of The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham, as read by the Bathroom Reader for a one-take toilet top audiobook production. I am filling in for the Plurality Report, who is currently embarking on an 800-mile-long pilgrimage across the Spanish highlands in order to find himself. Chapter 16. Contact. We had covered perhaps half the distance back to Schoening when Josella noticed the smoke. At first sight it might have been a cloud, but as we neared the top of the hill, we could see the gray column beneath the more diffused upper layer. She pointed to it and looked at me without a word. The only fires we had seen in years had been a few spontaneous outbreaks in later summer. We both knew at once that the plume ahead was rising from the neighborhood of Schoening. I forced the half-track along at a greater speed than it had ever done on the deteriorated roads. We were thrown about inside it, and yet still seemed to be crawling. Josella sat silent all the time, her lips pressed together and her eyes fixed on the smoke. I knew that she was searching for some indication that the source was nearer or farther away, anywhere but at Schoening itself. But the closer we came, the less room there was for doubt. We tore up the final lane, quite oblivious of the stings whipping at the vehicle as it passed. Then, at the turn, we were able to see that it was not the house itself, but the wood pile that was ablaze. A sound of the horn, Susan came running out to pull on the rope which opened the gate from a safe distance. She shouted something which was drowned in the rattle of our driving in. Her free hand was pointing, not to the fire, but toward the front of the house. As we ran farther into the yard, we could see the reason. Skillfully landed in the middle of our lawn stood the helicopter. By the time we were out of the half-truck, a man in a leather jacket and breeches had come out of the house. He was tall, fair, and sunburned. At first glance, I had a feeling I had seen him somewhere before. He waved and grinned cheerfully as we hurried across. "Mr. Bill Mason, I presume? My name is Simpson, Ivan Simpson."
"I remember," said Josella. "You brought in a helicopter that night at the university building."
"That's right. Clever of you to remember. But just to show you're not the only one with a memory, you are Josella Playton, author of—"
"You're quite wrong," she interrupted him firmly. "I'm Josella Mason, author of David Mason."
"Ah, yes, I've been looking at the original edition, and a very creditable bit of craftsmanship too, if I may say so."
"Hold on a bit," I said. "That fire—"
"It's safe enough, blowing away from the house, though I'm afraid most of your stock of wood has gone up."
"What happened?"
"That was Susan. She didn't mean to miss the place. When she heard my engine, she grabbed the flamethrower and bounded out to start a signal as quickly as she could. The wood pile was handiest. No one could have missed what she did to that."
We went inside and joined the others.
"By the way," Simpson said to me, "Michael said I was to be sure to start off with his apologies."
"To me?" I said, wondering.
"You were the only one who saw any danger in the Triffids, and he didn't believe you."
"But do you mean to say you knew I was here?"
"We found out very roughly your probable location a few days ago, from a fellow we all have cause to remember, one Coker."
"So Coker came through too," I said. "After the shambles I saw at Tynesome, I'd an idea the plague might have got him."
Later on, when we had had a meal and produced our best brandy, we got the story out of him. When Michael Beadley and his party had gone, leaving Tynesome to the mercies and principles of Miss Durant, they had not made for Beaminster, nor anywhere near it. They had gone northeast into Oxfordshire. Miss Durant's misdirection to us must have been deliberate, for Beaminster had never been mentioned. They had found there an estate which seemed at first to offer the group all it required, and no doubt they could have entrenched themselves there as we had entrenched ourselves at Sherning. But as the menace of the Triffids increased, the disadvantages of the place became more obvious. In a year, both Michael and the Colonel were highly dissatisfied with the longer-term prospects there. A great deal of work had already been put into the place, but by the end of the second summer there was general agreement that it would be better to cut their losses. To build a community, they had to think in years, in those terms, a considerable number of years. They also had to bear in mind that the longer they delayed, the more difficult any move would be. What they needed was a place where they would have room to expand and develop, an area with natural defenses, which, once it had been cleared of Triffids, would economically be kept clear of them. Where they now were, a high proportion of their labor was occupied with maintaining fences, and as their numbers increased, the length of the fence line would have to be increased. Clearly, the best self-maintaining defense line would be water. To that end, they had held a discussion on the relative merits of various islands. It had been chiefly climate that had decided them in favor of the Isle of Wight, despite some misgivings over the area that would have to be cleared. Accordingly, in the following March, they had packed up again and moved on. "When we got there," Ivan said, "the Triffids seemed even thicker than when we'd left. No sooner had we begun to settle ourselves into a big country house near the God Shell than they started collecting along the walls in thousands. We let 'em come for a couple weeks or so, then we went for 'em with flamethrowers. After we'd wiped out that lot, we let them accumulate again, and then we blitzed 'em once more, and so on. We could afford to do it properly there, because once we were clear of them, we didn't need to use the flamethrowers anymore. There could only be a limited number on the island, and the more of them that came round us to be wiped out, the better we liked it. We had to do it a dozen times before there was any appreciable effect. All round the walls we had a belt of charred stumps before they began to get showy. There were a devil of a lot more of them than we had expected. There used to be at least half a dozen nurseries breeding high-quality Triffids on the island, not to mention the private and park ones," I said. "That doesn't surprise me. There might have been 100 nurseries by the look of it. Before all this began, I'd have to say there were only a few thousand of the things in the whole country, if anyone had asked me, but there must have been hundreds of thousands." "There were," I said. "They'll grow practically anywhere, and they were pretty profitable. There didn't seem to be so many when they were penned up in farms and nurseries. All the same, judging from the amount round here, there must be the whole tracts of country practically free of them now." "That's so," he agreed. "But go and live there, and they'll start collecting in a few days. You can see that from the air. I'd have known there was someone here without Susan's fire. They make a dark border round any inhabited place." Still, we managed to thin down the crowd round our walls after a bit. Maybe they got to find it unhealthy, or maybe they didn't care a lot for walking about on the charred remains of their relatives. And, of course, there were fewer of them. So then we started going out to hunt them instead of just letting them come to us. It was our main job for months. Between us we covered every inch of the island, or thought we did. By the time we were through, we reckoned we'd put paid to everyone in the place, big and small. Even so, some managed to appear the next year and the year after that. Now we have an intensive search every spring on account of seeds blowing over from the mainland, and settle with them right away. While that was going on, we were getting organized. There were some 50 or 60 of us to begin with. I took flips in the helicopter, and when I saw signs of a group anywhere, I'd go down and issue a general invitation to come along. Some did, but a surprising number simply weren't interested. They'd escaped from being governed, and in spite of all their troubles, they didn't want any more of it. There are some lots in southern Wales that have started sorts of tribal communities and resent the idea of any organization except the minimum they've set up for themselves. You'll find similar lots near the other coalfields too. Usually the leaders are the men who happened to be on the shift below ground, so that they never saw the green stars, though God knows how they ever got up the shafts again. Some of them so definitely don't want to be interfered with that they shoot at the aircraft. There's one lot like that in Brighton. I know, I said. They warned me off too. Recently there are more like that. There's one at Maidstone, another at Guildford, and other places. They're the real reason why we hadn't spotted you hidden away here before. The district didn't seem too healthy when one got close to it. I don't know what they were thinking they were doing. Probably got some food dumps and are scared of everyone else just wanting some of it. Anyway, there's no sense in taking risks, so I just let 'em stew. Still, quite a lot did come along. In a year, we'd gone up to 300 or so, not all sighted, of course. It wasn't until about a month ago that I came across Coker in his lot, and one of the first things he asked was, by the way, was whether you'd shown up. They had had a bad time, particularly at first. A few days after he got back to Tyneside, a couple of women came along from London and brought the plague with them. Coker quarantined them at first symptoms, but it was too late. He decided on a quick move. Mr. Rant wouldn't budge. She decided to stay and look after the sick and follow later if she could, but she never did. They took the infection with them. There were 3 more hurried moves before they succeeded in shaking free of it. By then they had gone as far west as Devonshire, and they were all right for a bit there, but soon they began to find the same difficulties as we had, and you have. Coker stuck it out there for nearly 3 years, and then reasoned along much the same lines as we did, only he didn't think of an island. Instead, he decided on a river boundary and a fence to cut off the toe of Cornwall. When they got there, they spent the first months building their barrier, then they went for the Triffids inside, much as we had on the island. They had more difficult country to work with, though, and they never did succeed in clearing them out completely. The fence was fairly successful to begin with, but they never could depend on it as we could trust to the sea, and too much of their manpower had been wasted on patrols. Coker thinks they might have made out all right once the children had grown old enough to work, but it would have been tough going all the time. When I did find them, they hadn't much hesitation about coming along. They set about loading up their fishing boats right away, and they were all on the island in a couple of weeks. When Coker found you weren't with us, he suggested you might still be somewhere in these parts.
You can tell him that wipes out any hard feelings about him, said Josella.
He's going to be a very useful man, Ivan said. And from what he tells us, you can be too, he said, looking at me. You're a biochemist, aren't you?
A biologist, I said.
Well, you can hold on to your fine distinctions. The point is, Michael has tried to get some research going into a method of knocking off Triffids scientifically. That has to be found if we're going to get anywhere at all. But the trouble so far is that the only people we have to work on it are a few who have forgotten most of the biology they learned at school. What do you think? Like to turn professor? Be a worthwhile job.
I can't think of one that would be more worthwhile, I told him.
Does this mean you're inviting us to all your island haven? Dennis asked. Well, to come on mutual approval at least, Ivan replied. Bill and Josella will probably remember the broad principles laid down that night at the university. They still stand. We aren't out to reconstruct. We want to build something new and better. Some people don't take to that. If they don't, they're no use to us. We just aren't interested in having an opposition party that's trying to perpetuate a lot of the old bad features. We'd rather people who want that went elsewhere.
Elsewhere sounds a pretty poor offer in the circumstances, remarked Dennis.
Oh, I don't mean we throw them back to the Triffids, but there were a number of them, and there had to be some place for them to go. So a party went across to the Channel Isles and started cleaning up there on the same lines as we'd cleaned up the Isle of Wight. About 100 of them moved over. They're doing all right there. So now we have this mutual approval system. Newcomers spend 6 months with us, then there's a council hearing. If they don't like our ways, they say so, and if we don't think they'll fit, we say so. If they fit, they stay. If not, we see that they get to the Channel Isles, or back to the mainland, if they're odd enough to prefer that.
Sounds to have a touch of the dictatorial. How's this council of yours formed? Dennis wanted to know.
Ivan shook his head. It'd take too long to go into constitutional questions now. The best way to learn about it is to come and find out. If you like us, you'll stay, but even if you don't, I think you'll find the Channel Isles a better spot than this is likely to be a few years from now. In the evening, after Ivan had taken off and vanished away to the southwest, I went and sat on my favorite bench in a corner of the garden. I looked across the valley, remembering the well-drained and tended meadows that had been there. Now it was far on its way back to the wild. The neglected fields were dotted with thickets, beds of reeds, and stagnant pools. The bigger trees were slowly drowning in the sodden soil. I thought of Coker and his talk of the leader, the teacher, and the doctor, and of all the work that would be needed to support us on our few acres, of how it would affect each of us if we had been imprisoned here, of the 3 blind ones still feeling useless and frustrated as they grew older, of Susan, who should have the chance of a husband and babies, of David and Mary's little girl, and any other children there who and any other children there might be who would have to become laborers as soon as they were strong enough. Of Josella and myself having to work still harder as we became older, because there would be more to feed and more work that must be done by hand. Then there were the Triffids patiently waiting. I could see hundreds of them in a dark green hedge beyond the fence. There must be research, some natural enemy, some poison, a debalancer of some kind. Something must be found to deal with them. There must be relief from other work for that, and soon. Time was on the Triffids' side. They had only to go on waiting while we used up our resources. First, no more fuel, then no more wire to mend the fences, and they, or their descendants, would still be waiting there when the wire rusted through. And yet Schurning had become our home. I sighed. There was a light step on the grass. Josella came and sat down beside me. I put an arm round her shoulders. "What do they think about it?" I asked her. "They're badly upset, poor things. It must be hard for them to understand how the Triffids wait like that when they can't see them, and then they can find their way about here, you see. It must be dreadful to have to contemplate going to an entirely strange place when you're blind. They only knew what we tell them. I don't think they properly understood how impossible it will become here. If it weren't for the children, I believe they'd say no flatly. It's their place, you see, all they have left. They feel that very much." She paused, then she added, "They think that, but of course, it's not really their place at all. It's ours, isn't it? We've worked hard for it." She put her hand on mine. "You've made it and kept it for us, Bill. What do you think? Shall we stay a year or 2 longer?" "No," I said. "I worked because everything seemed to depend on me. Now it seems rather futile." "Oh, darling, don't. A knight-errant isn't futile. You fought for all of us and kept the dragons away." "It's mostly the children," I said. "Yes, the children," she agreed. "And all the time, you know, I've been haunted by Coca, the first generation laborers, the next savages. I think we had better admit defeat before it comes, and go now. She pressed my hand.
Not defeat, Bill, dear. Just what's the phrase? A strategic withdrawal. We withdraw to work and plan for the day when we can come back. And one day we will. You'll show us how to wipe out every one of these foul Triffids and get our land back from them for us.
You've a lot of faith, darling.
And why not?
Well, at least I'll be fighting them. But first we go when?
Do you think we could let them have the summer out here? It could be a sort of holiday for all of us, with no preparations to make for the winter. We deserve a holiday too.
I should think we could do that, I agreed. We sat watching the valley dissolve in the dusk. Josella said,
It's queer, Bill. Now I can go. I don't really want to. Sometimes it's seemed like prison, but now it seems like treachery to leave it. You see, I've been happier here than ever in my life before, in spite of everything.
As for me, my sweet, I wasn't even alive before. But we'll have better times yet, I promise you.
It's silly, but I shall cry when we do go. I shall cry buckets. You mustn't mind, she said.
But, as things fell out, we were all of us much too busy to cry.